Hi there, Molly Wallen here, and we are going to be discussing our flight scenario 3. So for today's flight scenario, I am taking a friend on a 200 nautical mile cross-country flight to go to a baseball game. While in town, I will be dropping off a business proposal to the local branch. So for this flight, I will be using the company's twin aircraft, and as of now, the conditions of flight are VFR. So just a couple things that I want to keep in mind and do before the flight even begins. Because this flight is more than 50 nautical miles VFR, we want to get a proper pre-flight. So for that, we want to get proper weather reports, fuel requirements, alternate if the flight cannot be completed, takeoff and landing distances, and so forth. For this flight, I will want to grab a proper weather briefing. So already the week of the flight, we can kind of be keeping an eye on the weather, checking our phone, just using the weather app. The day before, I can go ahead and get an Outlook weather briefing, and then the morning of, within 2 hours of the flight, a standard weather briefing. And then if the flight's pushed back for any reason, we can get an abbreviated briefing from there. For this flight, we want to make sure to plan it all out. I like to use ForeFlight, but we also have our sectional maps that we can kind of map out where we're going to be going, making sure that there's not any obstacles or terrain in the way. The next thing, have I been flying recently? Am I current for flight? If I'm taking a passenger, I need to have done my 3 takeoffs and landings within 90 days. Because I'm coming back from a baseball game, we can kind of assume it will be at night. So for that, I will make sure to have done those landings to a full stop, made sure I've had my flight review within the 24 calendar months. Twin aircraft, am I familiar with the automation inside of the airplane? If not, we just want to make sure to look that over just in case anything would happen, that we are proficient on that. And then before the flight, we will be using the PAVE checklist to mitigate any risks. Okay, so this is possibly a new area for me. 200 nautical miles away is pretty far, so we want to be familiar with our loss procedures. I like to use the 5 C's when keeping the loss procedures in mind. So the very first thing to do, if I'm flying along and I'm suddenly not sure of where I am, is to do a full 360 degree circle. This way, it gives me an idea to see where I was just at, and then if I am lost, doing a full 360 doesn't get me further off course. The next step in the 5C model is to confess. This is to myself. This is to make sure that I'm staying calm, allowing myself to know that I am lost, but there are options that I can do, and just to not get too stressed out over it. So the next thing we want to do is climb. By climbing up, we have a better bird's eye view of the scenery. Maybe at a higher view, that lake will be more familiar to us to know where we are when looking at our sectional chart. So if we have climbed to a higher altitude, we want to make sure that we are conserving. We want to be at the maximum endurance power setting. Just in case we get further lost and we do need to land, we want to make sure that we are conservative with our fuel. We want to then communicate, mostly to, hopefully we're on with tower at this point. If we do become lost and we haven't, we can try any of the previous frequencies that we have been on. If we are not able to get a hold of ATC, we want to use the available nav aids. Then we want to contact approach frequency and do a pan report. Worst case scenario, we can squawk 7700 for an emergency situation before landing. And then if we have done that, we want to comply. If we are going to go land in a field area, we want to circle to make sure that there is no tower or power lines or anything like that. Make sure that it's a safe area to land. We want to see where the winds are to get the best landing. So I like to use the 5P model for different phases of flight. This is just in order to mitigate risks. Single pilot resource management is all about utilizing your resources both inside and outside of the aircraft, both before, during, and after, to have a successful outcome of our flight. So for the 5P model, I like to use the I'm safe checklist for the pilot, just making sure I'm not ill, on any medication, stressed. I haven't had any alcohol before the flight or within 8 hours. I've eaten, and emotions are just, everything is just fine. Plan, have I properly mapped out my route of flight? Have we verified terrain? There's no obstacles in the way, just making sure airspace. Plane, before the flight, have I done a thorough walkthrough? Have I used my checklist to make sure that I'm not forgetting anything? Make sure we have plenty of fuel for the flight. Did I verify that all the aircraft documents are in the aircraft? Then while using the checklist, have we made sure that there are no MELs? If so, we want to go to 91-205 and then 91-213 to see how to go about that process. Passengers, she is my extra set of eyes and ears. Just make sure to do a proper briefing with her on when she can and cannot speak, just so that I can get proper listening to ATC. And then programming, I want to make sure that I'm familiar with this aircraft. I have been doing the G1000, so I'm familiar with all of the automation. I want to make sure to load the flight plan into the flight before so I'm not getting distracted. Does the aircraft have automation? I'm sorry, I meant to say autopilot. If the aircraft does have autopilot, that can greatly reduce your workload. CFIT is a very common result of combination of factors due to weather, unfamiliar environment, non-standard procedures, not understanding that hazards. So we want to make sure that we've got everything loaded in. By having autopilot, then I can focus more outside of the aircraft to reduce the possibility of flight into terrain. So gathering weather before the flight. Just a couple things to keep in mind. I want to grab a METAR for my departure and destination airport. So your METAR is your current weather observed at that airport. Your TAF, on the other hand, is a forecast of the weather within a 5-mile radius of that airport. Temperature and winds aloft is very important. Gives you different winds and temperatures at different altitude, which can be beneficial for flight planning purposes. And then a surface analysis chart I like to look over. It's going to just give me a general synopsis of my flights produced every 3 hours. So it's going to give you your isobars, which are your lines of equal pressure. It kind of gives you an idea of how the winds are going to be, and then the position of highs and lows, as well as frontal systems. So before the flight, I like to use my ForeFlight and grab a weather briefing. When you put in the flight plan, it's going to give you the adverse conditions. That'll be the first thing that pops up. So while looking at that, if you see that there are SIGMETs or convective segments, you know that's going to be an immediate no-go of flight. It's going to also give your urgent PIREPs at this point. So this is going to be the first step of, oh, is this flight going to even happen? After the adverse conditions, you get the synopsis. That's going to be your surface analysis chart, which I had just talked about. Then it's going to give you your current weather, your METARs, and any pilot reports that someone may have given you out. It's just going to let you know maybe turbulence or something along the route of flight. And then an IF, your forecast. That's going to give you your TAFs both at your departure destination. It's going to give you along your route of flight, different airport information along to give you an idea of that. If the winds are too strong, maybe you don't want to go today. And then your NOTAMs is going to be the very last thing. If there is an ILS out, if you're doing an instrument flight plan, runways out, it's just a good idea to look over your NOTAMs before going on the actual flight. And then finally, just a couple more checklists to go to make sure that we're being safe. We've got our PAVE checklist and our DECIDE model. Your PAVE checklist is used during the pre-flight planning stages. I already mentioned the I'm Safe checklist, but I also want to verify that I've reviewed my personal minimums and that I'm good to go on that. We don't want to push anything, especially if we're going to an unfamiliar airport. Aircraft, have I gotten the proper weight and balance information? We verified all the documents. Make sure the aircraft is legal to even fly. Environment, we've reviewed the weather, we've checked out terrain, we've checked out airspace. If we're going to certain altitudes, does the aircraft have oxygen inside? And then external pressures. Am I being pressured to go on this flight because of the baseball game, or because my boss wants me to deliver this business proposal? So do I have get-there-itis, or can this flight be pushed back? And then during the flight, I like to use The DECIDE model, it's a 6-step process to help make good aeronautical decisions. It can be used during all phases of flight. So if we're flying along, if we detect a change, allows you to go about thoroughly deciding what you want to do. Do you want to estimate the need to react, choose the best outcome, identify the actions, then you want to do them, and then evaluate. Through evaluating, you can decide the next steps from there. These are my resources. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks.